Today, I'm talking to Nikolaj Bomann Mertz, the co-founder and CEO of Franklin, a Copenhagen FinTech that just closed 1.6 million euros in funding to bring AI-powered finance to e-commerce. In 2 years' time, he's gone from zero to more than 250 customers, and he's now expanding across Europe. Here's how he did it. Hi, Nikolaj. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Before we get started, I would like to ask you, when you go to a network event or some kind of party, how do you usually introduce yourself?
If I see someone I want to talk to, I just go straight to them and say, hi, I'm Nikolaj. Keen to get to know you or figure out something we have in common. So
Yeah.
It's usually just whatever the situation is like allows, then heading for that.
Cool. Yeah. What are one or two things that you tell about yourself or about your company?
I guess it's always easy just to start asking questions in a way. So what do you do for a living? Like, depending on the networking event, like why are you here? Who do you work for? Yeah, those kind of openers usually get the conversation going. And I guess I'm the kind of guy who can quickly come up with a different question. So and then the conversation is rolling. So
Yeah.
And if someone is like not really responsive, then probably just heading off to the next one.
Exactly. Yeah, I got you. And is that also a skill that you employed a lot at the beginning of when you started the company? I can imagine, especially in the beginning, getting e-commerce merchants to hand over their ad spend and their card spend to, at that point, still a relatively unknown fintech company is a hard sell. Is that
Sure.
like, how did you convince your first 50 e-commerce businesses to trust you with their money?
Right. I mean, most entrepreneurs are somewhat of generalist, I guess, jack of all trades. And we are three co-founders that have a little bit of it, but we have a CTO. My first co-founder, he's a CTO, technical, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
My second co-founder, he's more on the commercial side, handling everything sales. And to your question around like trust, how to build trust with your first customers, I guess me and my co-founder Peter, we both have a quite commercial background. I've been in e-commerce marketing since I was more or less 14 years old, so
Wow.
quite a few years after all now. And he had a marketing agency that he built prior to Franklin. So, we came together and we were like, all right, let's just make the list of everyone we know and then just start pounding the phone because they have the trust already, right?
Right.
But to our surprise, it was the opposite. It was actually those customers who were the most reluctant to get going with Franklin. And you can maybe imagine like the pitch and like them thinking, okay, so my friend here, he's starting a payment card company where I need to hand over all of my money to him. Like, okay, there are how can he even do this? How can he handle it? So actually the first customers, they were like unknowns because sometimes it's the best way to, if you have prior, perception of who you're dealing with
Right.
here, then yeah, that can be a bit of a barrier as well. So the first customers were 10 unknown ones, either being cold called or introduced by investors or something like that. And obviously the best way to build trust is really piggyback on someone else's trust
Mm-hmm.
and really know your shit. Like know what you're talking about, because the moment you start waving too much and like, I'm not sure, and then people are like, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
We also had some funny story where we were onboarding one of the largest e-commerce customers here largest e-commerce companies here in Denmark, where the platform was quite new and there were a technical issue that was basically just a UI technical glitch. But that meant that the customer were like, okay, what is this? Is this stuff even working? If you don't even know how to onboard me, how do you know how to handle my money? So small things can really matter in this world where you're moving around money, right? So it's a lot of stuff there.
And how did it develop for you, that confidence? Is it something that's sort of native to you, or is it something that really developed over the years building the company?
Prior to building Franklin, then I was at another fintech startup here in Denmark where it was a robo-advisory service. So there I learned everything I knew about like fintech, KYC, KYB, how to build trust, because that was a consumer play. So there you need to be even better at building trust, would I say, at least. So I learned a lot there, and that was, how we got started. And then you just have the basic understanding. But obviously back then we thought we knew quite a bit, but looking back, we knew nothing. So
Yeah.
yeah. You learn as you go along.
Exactly, yeah. And what were some of the objections that you heard in the beginning when you started talking to your first customers or leads? What did those conversations look like?
I mean, not surprisingly, it was so how are my funds secured, and like how does this work? And one of the challenges that we faced, that we're still facing today, actually, even though we have a couple of hundred customers and like doing quite well and a known brand here in Denmark, is the challenge with us expense management, spend management, finance platforms. We are able to give a cashback on all your card spend. And if you don't know how payment cards work, that can seem a little bit scammy in a way, that you kind of say to people like, move over all of your marketing expenses or all of your card expenses to us, and we'll give you 0.5% cashback, up to 1%, whatever. And you don't have to pay anything for it.
Right.
And we'll sort out everything related to bookkeeping, and it doesn't cost you anything. And then, when we hear that as a consumer, then sometimes you're a little bit like, all right, red flag here. People trying to lure my money out.
Too good to be true.
Too good to be true, right? Yeah. Free money, cheap, all that stuff. But in this case, it's actually true, right? Because of the interchange that card programs get, we can offer a cashback and automate all of the bookkeeping for our customers. So that's the first objection we got, and that's still one we hear today for customers that are unknown to us or don't know us. How do you guys make money? How does this work? How are you trying to screw me over almost?
Yeah.
So that's still an objection we see today.
And is there a way you sort of facilitate the process? You obviously now have more experience with those type of objections. Do you automate that or create content to educate the customer? How do you support those type of questions?
I think it's down to the fact that you're able to explain to a customer like exactly how this works. Because one thing is to say, okay, how do we make money? But then when the customer starts asking follow-up questions, that you can really, explain the depth of how this works. So the more layers you kind of get down, your answers are still solid. And you can maybe even challenge their perception or how they're thinking. If you can do that and really demonstrate this, then I think that's paramount to be able to, build trust with anyone.
Gotcha. Yeah. Is there, because you guys had a recent raise, I think 2 in quite a short amount of time, actually consecutive, right? What does that mean for the business? Like after the second raise, like how does that change the trajectory that you're on right now?
So when we first started Franklin, we had a great vision of what we wanted to do. I can come back to that because there was a lot we did wrong in the beginning that I can totally share, so other people don't have to make the same mistakes. But the vision is grand, and we want to do a lot of stuff. We raised a few rounds already, and the recent round of 1.6 million euros is going to enable us to get closer to that vision of that end product and the vision of becoming the preferred solution finance platform for e-commerce businesses in Europe. We're only in Denmark as of now. We're just entering the Netherlands, so we're making our first steps there, and Belgium, so the wider Benelux actually. So that's something the funds are going to enable us to do, because despite EU being a single market and all that stuff, it's still a lot of different independent countries with different payment rails, different currencies, different bookkeeping systems. So there's a ton of stuff that is different from market to market that we need. Besides just the normal, like, go-to-market might be different, the competitors might be different. Then there is also some of the products on the product side that we need to adjust in order to really succeed. So expansion is one thing, international expansion. Another thing is building out the product, adding more features. We still have a lot of stuff to sort out on the core product, but we're also building new things to sort of enable us to reach that vision of setting out everything finance for e-commerce. That's where we're heading. So now we want to cover the whole expense side of things before heading on to the other side of things.
Right, keeping things solid. Yeah, you mentioned the differences between all the different markets in Europe. And that's actually one of the reasons why we started this podcast to, there's a lot of content for the US, which is a very big homogeneous market. Of course, different states, also differences. But there's so many differences in Europe between the different countries, let alone the different languages. And we wanted to have something where we can bring all those different things together. You mentioned you guys are now expanding into the Benelux. I imagine that's the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, and then the Netherlands. So far, what did you have identified for the differences between like Dutch merchants and Danish ones?
Obviously, yeah, besides all the product related stuff like, currencies, payment rails, all that stuff, on the cultural side, I think we also might have chosen some of the ones that are the more similar. And that's one of the reasons why we chose Benelux, because the cultural gap is smaller compared to France or Germany, Spain. So that is one of the reasons. We've not experienced that much yet in terms of gaps and challenges when it comes to the cultural aspects.
Right.
But on the product side and the whole KYB side, like how do you in our case, onboarding is one of our biggest challenges. We're doing a lot of work to get customers on board. Where software solutions sometimes it's just a one-click authenticate with your Google account, then you're a customer almost, right?
Wow.
Maybe into your card details. In our case, it's like we have a lot of stuff. We have, KYB, which means like we need to know everything about the company, who are the owners, who are the directors. On the individual owners, we need passport information, national IDs, whatever. So there's a lot of stuff we need to know in order to do an actual onboarding.
Yeah.
And that's also why we're a little bit picky about like who we get in. If people come to us, we'd love to bring anyone on board. But when we are targeting our customers, we are trying to find the ones that are ideal fits, where we know it's worth the hassle of onboarding. So. You need to keep the momentum like going very well and have the motivation sort of there all the time to complete an onboarding with us. It's a struggle among all financial platforms that are doing KYB, KYC.
And what does that ideal customer look like? If you're really yourself picking one, like what do they look like?
So it's e-commerce businesses that are usually smaller teams, 5 to 15, 20 people maybe, have a solid spend on marketing channels, software, using Shopify, using Klaviyo, typically very lean organizations, so high turnover revenue compared to the number of employees. Typically, they're in their home market, but maybe 1 or 2 markets in addition to that. So growing, and yeah, I mean the best customers are the ones that we can scale with, and yeah, those are the core ICP. But obviously, we also have a few outliers like marketing agencies, marketplaces, software companies that are maybe running a lot of ads. So yeah, we do have quite a few different ones, but our core ICP is usually running on Shopify and having quite a few expenses on Meta and Google.
Yeah, exactly. And what problem do these companies run into, or maybe they don't even identify that as a direct problem themselves? But what do you see as their problem that validates need for your product? Like, why do people come to you?
So people choose us for 2 reasons. One is that we save them time in terms of bookkeeping, so we can automate all of the bookkeeping they're doing on ads, software, everyday expenses. We can sort that out for them so they can save a bunch of time. But we can also save them a lot of money in terms of the cashback that we can give. So every time you spend 100 euros, we put back €1 into your account in the following month. So that means that you choose us for either the 2. Typically, it's the cashback that gets people's attention. Like, okay, free money here, let's talk. And then on the other side, it's actually the bookkeeping, automated bookkeeping that helps pull the deal over, because at the end of the day, a couple of €100 saved is nice, but if you can save me time, then you have my attention.
Right.
So that's really where the core offering is, and where we are building a lot of stuff to help people save even more time.
Yeah. And what's an example of what does an e-commerce operator run into when they're running ads on Meta or TikTok? Like, what's a headache that they run into on a day-to-day basis that really is solved by this bookkeeping application?
When I was a CMO in a FinTech company prior to starting Franklin, and I was the guy running ads. And one day, I just noticed on our dashboard that we didn't get any leads in, we didn't get any customers. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I had to look into a Meta ads account to see what's going on. I could see we weren't running any ads. And obviously that's the reason why we didn't get any customers. And then I was looking into why that was. And Meta was saying, hey, we couldn't charge you the amount that you owe us. So we shut down the account. And then we were like, why didn't you charge us? There's money in the bank. But then we realized the bank had closed our card and we had to call the bank, figuring out like, okay, what's going on here? And end of the day, it was the bank that shut down our card due to the spending limits that were on our cards. Wow. So it wasn't because of credit. It wasn't because of liquidity or anything. It was just because we hit a practical spending limit on our payment card. And that was the moment where I was like, all right, we need to fix this. We need to solve it. And then I started looking into payment cards and figured out there was a lot of stuff. I was also the guy who, end of the month, had to collect a lot of receipts. I just got a spreadsheet of ton of receipts I need to go get, and I was spending, hours here and there. And while it's nice to save an hour or two, it's just as much the frustration that is coming along with it, because no one likes to do bookkeeping. You kind of need to do it. The government says you need to. There are laws that says you need to do it, but obviously you also want to make sure you have accurate data in your ERP system. So there are a lot of reasons why you should do it, but as an individual contributor, you can sometimes feel like, okay, I'm not just doing busy work here where that doesn't lead to any value, at least not for my work. So can we automate that? Can we prevent cards from being blocked? Can we give a little bit of cashback that actually pays the bill? Then we have a solid winning combination of a product. Yeah.
Nice. So the e-commerce operator doesn't need to do any card registration or validation anymore at Meta or at TikTok. That's all handled sort of through you.
Yeah, so the way it works, when you're onboarded with us, you have your cards, then you just basically take your Franklin card, enter the details on Meta, Google, if you have Shopify, Klaviyo, wherever, and then, you're paying with your Franklin card then.
Gotcha.
Then we fetch all the receipts for you, so you don't have to do all the bookkeeping related to it. You can connect your accounting system. Exact Online is a big one in the Netherlands. In Denmark, we have Visma Economic. Another market is another one. And then we can automate all of it for you.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Going back a little bit to the different markets in Europe, is there like a thing that already surprised you about the Dutch market so far?
I mean, it's early days still. So the prices we've got they're very, like, looking back at it, like very practical and very much like, all right, it's on the backside of your passport, the equivalent to a social security number is like, that's the kind of stuff where, okay, then we just do one more round of like getting that number. And on the KVK, the Chamber of Commerce in the Netherlands, then you can't just look up everything, where in Denmark we have quite open, is what I realized at least, quite open information about every company. You can see all the owners, you can see a lot of UBOs, like who are the ultimate business owners. So I think we got surprised by how the practical things are different, except for just, card currencies and payment rails, etc. Those are the kind of surprises we've got so far, and I'm 100% sure we'll meet even more as we expand.
Of course, yeah. How do you already, and I mean, your whole company shows that, but you already mentioned you guys are quite ambitious, big thinking about the future. How do you balance that out with taking things step by step, conquering markets country by country without sort of taking a bite that's too big to swallow?
I was talking to a founder here in Denmark the other day who's now starting his own company. He had a previous one, and we had a good chat, and we realized that, or we talked about that one of the biggest sort of issues us founders we are experiencing, especially in Denmark, but maybe also in Europe on a wider scale, is lack of ambitions. So if you don't have strong ambitions and really want to, make an impact in the world and not just in your local market, that can be the biggest, the reason why you won't make it, because you're thinking too narrow and thinking too small. So that's, and ambition is a funny size, because in the sense that if you don't think big enough, you might just limit yourself. But ambition also comes with, you seeing yourself succeed a little bit. So you're kind of gaining the confidence that you can actually pull this off and you can actually make it. Because in the beginning, I was like, all right, if we can get to 1 million euros ARR, we've made it. I think there might have been a step before. If we can just get a few employees where we can pay their salaries, we've made it. But now I can see like, all right, if we don't conquer the whole of Europe, we haven't made it. So we need to get there. And that's the funny thing about ambition. You kind of keeps pushing the ceiling higher and higher. So that's something I've learned, at least, to never settle, to quote the good Nikolaj from Revolut. It's like, push the boundaries and increase the ceiling, height of the ceiling. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I love that energy. What do you think is it about Europeans, maybe a bit over generalized, but what is it about us that we sort of seem to lack that ambition, especially if we compare ourselves to our American cousins?
I think it's down to how we're raised and how like our parents taught us stuff. My parents have always been like, oh, you need your education, you need to make sure you're getting a good job, and like they never taught me like, okay, go all in on your own business. Go reach for the sky. That's never been a conversation we've had as such. Not that my parents, they are not ambitious at all, but because they are within their own jobs.
Yeah.
But it's still something you need to, understand early, I think. School system are probably not teaching us the confidence either that we need to have in order to really be ambitious and succeed. So various things, where I think if you look towards on the other side of the pond, then, you can just feel the energy whenever you're talking to people. They are thinking big. They are like, okay, sky's the limit. That's the difference, I think, between us and the US.
Yeah. Is there something we can do from a EU or policy standpoint that would really help that? Like what are one or two things maybe that would help to trigger that ambition and make it easier for people to also employ it here?
I think we're hearing some good things regarding the EU Inc. The single
Yes.
entity type that the EU is talking about. Now, when I was looking into the Netherlands at first, and I'm not sure if it's like how it actually works, but to what I learned was the moment you have more than one employee in the Netherlands, at least as a Danish company, you need to have a local entity and everything that follows along with it. So obviously that creates a bit of a barrier as well. We've chosen to hire people from the Netherlands, from Belgium, get them here in office in Copenhagen, so we can really scale from here.
Nice.
And then we'd much rather just fly in once a month or a couple of times a month to really be present, because that's what it takes as well. And then obviously we have a few really great guys here who can also eventually maybe start up the market or start an office there locally. So we carry on the culture.
Smart.
That's how we've chosen to go about it, at least.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And how does that roadmap look for you? Like, let's talk a bit about your ambition going 10 years into the future. How do you go market by market, and which ones do you prioritize? How does it look like for you?
I've lived in the UK myself a couple of years back, and the UK has always been on my radar as one of the first market. But due to Brexit, there's just a little bit more work to do on the compliance side, on the different licensing side of things, regulatory side of things. So, but that's definitely next up for us, besides Benelux. So that's market that is 10 times bigger in many senses compared to many other markets. It's a financial sort of headquarter a little bit in Europe, I feel like. Germany as well is super interesting. France is obviously a massive market. So those are on our radar too. But in a way, the Netherlands is super competitive when it comes to FinTech. Yeah. There's a lot of e-com, but there's also a lot of FinTechs. It's one of the countries in the world with the most licenses per capita, financial licenses. So there's quite a bit of competition there, which also to me means that, okay, if we can make it there, we can make it everywhere. So that's a little bit how we went about it. So really, it maybe the TAM is a little bit smaller compared to the UK, for instance. But if we can make it in the Netherlands, we can also make it in any other market. Not to say that the UK is still quite competitive, but it's probably also easier for me as a founder to go in there You probably want to speak as a Brit. You want to speak to a Brit, preferably. But you can also speak to a founder who knows somewhat English, I guess. Where it's harder. Not to say you guys, we can speak English to Dutch people, but we've chosen to hire Dutch people for the Dutch market. If someone called me from the Netherlands, I would just have a bit of a barrier, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, who are you? What are you trying to? I don't know you. Where if it's in my local language, I would be a little bit more receptive, I think.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And the Netherlands is also logical. You often hear, even for consumer products, that Denmark, the Netherlands is like a really easy next step because their markets are so similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are there any things that you already foresee in terms of differences on the product side or on the culture that you're really going to take into account when going into the UK?
Absolutely. I think there is, it's again like a new market in the sense that the core product works the same, but in terms of regulatory licensing, payment rails, like it's very simple stuff in many senses, but it does take a lot of time in our regulated world.
Yeah.
You're transferring money with faster payments, like SEPA Instant here in Europe or in EU, sorry. So there are differences on the product side as well, but it's not too much of a change from, let's say, Netherlands to Belgium, for instance. That's quite similar.
Right.
Where the UK is just slightly more different, but not much more different than Denmark to Sweden, for instance, or Norway for that matter. So on the cultural side, there will always be differences in the culture, how you work with people, like what time do you show up for a meeting, that kind of stuff. It's just, there are some nuances.
Yeah.
But I'm not too afraid of any of the differences that are there. What really matters, I think, is the execution that we pull. How hard we work to really make it work. Because at the end of the day, it's a matter of time and effort. Then we'll for sure make it.
How do you instill that in your team, that attitude, like hardworking, ambitious, and go get it attitude?
I think it starts at the first interview you have with a new hire. Really, you can most often sense it right out of the gate that okay, there's something here. Obviously, that's what you want to test for. That's one of the things I test for, at least in interviews. That's the grit, the motivation. Like, are people hungry? Do they have a chip on their shoulder? I think that's usually the best leading indicator for a great hire. If they have something they want to prove to the world. I do have that myself, and I think if someone else have it, then you want to find. Our new head of finance said it very well the other day. If I can align my career goals with Franklin, if Franklin succeeds over the next 5 years or 10 years, whatever, my career is sort of on the right track. If you can instill that into people and get them into that mindset, then you're in a good place. We're also these days hiring a lot, so I'm usually sending out like 2 packages, one where the base salary is a little bit lower, one where it's a little bit higher. But on the other side, the equity that we offer is sort of, if it's low base salary, then you get higher equity. So what you choose there is kind of interesting as well, because what is your, obviously there are people who just need a certain salary to make life work. I totally get that. But if you're sort of independent from that, then your mindset is like, all right, Franklin's going to succeed. I'm going for the big equity here. That's for me always a good sign. Not to say that the opposite is a bad sign, but at least that's upside maximization in a way.
Yeah. And there's people with different risk appetite, right? And yeah, that's a really nice system that you implement there. I'm really grateful for you sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience so far. And maybe the last thing I would like to ask you is what advice you would give to potential founders or people just starting out with a software or maybe a fintech product. Don't want to speak into your potential competition, but like, what would you advise them to do? And yeah, what's one thing that you could recommend, maybe even to your younger self, to the younger Nikolaj just starting out?
I feel like there's a lot that I could say here, but
Right.
one thing that is a small but interesting fact, you need to be comfortable with repeating yourself over and over again. It's whenever you have a message of, let's say you're hiring someone, then you want to talk to the team about it. you're going to say that to your colleagues, your friends, your family, and you're saying the same thing over and over again. And in the end of the day, you're like, all right, am I just repeating myself here? But you're saying it to new people, right? So it's new information. And I think that that's something that really now as the team scales, we're roughly 20 people now and getting up to 25 in a moment. And when you meet people over the coffee, it's like you're saying the same things over and over again. Be comfortable with that. That's definitely one thing. It's a small but a tangible advice that you need to learn how to do that. And same goes for investor meetings. If you're pitching investors, like you need to be comfortable sharing the same story over and over again because the next guys, they haven't heard it. So you need to put all the energy into that next version as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think
Yeah.
it's very practical advice for people want to use that. And you need the reps to get better at your pitch. So I think it's wonderful advice. Before we close off, is there like a place where they can people that listening to this, where they can follow you, or if maybe e-commerce operators or e-commerce people involved for the decision making on the ad spend, where can they get in contact with your company, with Franklin?
I guess for me, if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. That's definitely the best way to find me. And the same goes for Franklin, actually. But otherwise, head over to hifranklin.com and get in touch there if you want to learn more about Franklin.
Awesome. Well, Nikolaj, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experiences so far. I'm really looking forward because you guys are really accelerating at the moment and growing exponentially. So I'm really looking forward to the next steps, and we'll keep following you and your company.
Likewise, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.